This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Caroline Stokes, who is a leadership strategist for the Fifth Industrial Revolution and author of AfterShock to 2030, which is a CEO's guide to reinvention in the age of AI, climate, and societal collapse. Her work offers a radical roadmap for navigating disruption, grounded in trauma-aware systems, emotionally intelligent AI, and adaptive intelligence. A Sony alum who helped launch PlayStation, Caroline has evolved from executive headhunter to a globally recognized authority on psychological and strategic leadership reinvention. She works with CEOs, boards, and executive teams to build sovereign, trust-based systems that align with today's complex polycrisis environment. She is also the author of Elephants Before Unicorns, has been a co-author of Harvard Business Review Guide to Navigating the Toxic Workplace, and contributor to Coach Mel. Her insights have appeared in outlets including Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Forbes, The Globe, and Mail. Caroline has delivered keynotes and workshops around the world, including the World Bank, IEEE-USA, and the UN Peace Day celebration in Los Angeles. Her TEDx talk predicted the leadership challenges that organizations now face. So Caroline, welcome to the program. It's really great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
So it's just, let's start with a little context and tell us a little bit, in doing some research for this, I know that you had a real international experience as a kid, back and forth between continents. So tell us a little bit about that and then how you landed to what you're doing now.
Thanks for the question. So my international experience really made me, I have to say, and I think I explained that in my book, which is that when leaving England, the cozy 1970s living room from, and that coziness there, everything in orange and faded rugs and things like that, and TV, moved to Singapore. My father was a banker then, and supporting the growth of the East and China. And little did I know that moving to Singapore when you're 5 years of age, you don't know what you're doing. But I experienced a very different world, a very different environment, a systems-led environment that really protected people, focused on the planet, focused on growth that was sustainable. And I didn't have the words for it at that time, but that's what I saw, and that's what I was expecting the rest of the world to kind of be like. So as I returned at 8 years of age back to England, it felt like such a shock. There was a lot of racism, bullying, the capitalism, consumerism, all of the things that weren't really that present, or maybe I wasn't aware of it. Let's say that instead, was really made an impact. And from that moment on, it just changed my entire experience of a normal childhood, for better, I will say. Not necessarily for worse, because people might say, well, surely you didn't have that upbringing where, you would have felt normal, you would have felt like everybody else. And I kind of feel that not feeling like everybody else actually made me want to solve a lot of the challenges and review and assess, look into the systems, be critical of the systems, not necessarily in an activist's way, in an aggressive way, but in a way that really does kind of ask the questions and challenge the norms on how we as people, as leaders, as employees, as CEOs need to be in an organization to flourish and to sustain ourselves. So that's kind of the story. That's the story arc, but it takes a long time to get to that place. because I mean, we're in 2025 now, but in the 80s and in the 90s, I was told you should be a secretary and things like that. And I was thinking, why are you asking me to do something like that? That's just not really going to be me. So I found my own way based on what opportunities were available to me, and I was very fortunate. I was always very interested in technology, so I tried programming on one of the first home computers called the ZX81. I doubt very much that your listeners would know what that is. They do. Kudos, you know where I'm from. Tried programming, failed, realized I'm more interested in humans behind the technology and how solutions are being formed rather than trying to solve a technical problem, a data problem or a programming problem. I wasn't interested in that. It was more about the human systems. So, just observing, learning, exploring, being curious, seeing what really worked for me, what didn't. And because I was interested in technology, I was given my very first marketing job straight out of college. And then I started working at Virgin Interactive Entertainment. And I noticed that I really gravitated to games like Shuttle, the simulation, which would have been available in a very low specification PC back then. It was the beginning or the beginning of Macintosh technology back in 1991, 1992. Excuse me. And then I heard about this thing called that maybe Sony were releasing a game device. So this is over 30 years ago. And I said, well, I want to work at PlayStation. So it wasn't called PlayStation back then. So I found my way. It's called Searching the Hidden Market because I had this desire. I was going to work there. And I did. I was employee number 9. It was a completely different time. Trying to make that happen now would be very, very hard because people want to hire people with different backgrounds or more established backgrounds, more credentials, more MBAs, and what have you. But then it was the early 90s. It was the Wild West. I was in the right place at the right time. But I found a real problem with both of the organizations that I was in. Remember, this is the early 90s or the mid 90s. Executive coaching wasn't a thing. Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, his book had just come out, but it wasn't mainstream. And there's no way I would have acquired a book like that at the time. But I could see the gaps in how we were expected to perform, how communication wasn't happening in a proficient way to ensure that we were all on the same team, singing from the same page, all aligned, all able to communicate properly. And I could just see all of the different um, dynamics happening in the workplace. And that's really when I had my leadership moment, which is that I can't do enough for myself. I somehow I'd like to be part of a system or a range of systems where I can actually support the development for this. Let's call it utopian world that we're hopefully all able to experience in the not too distant future. So that's kind of where that's at, and I'm very glad that I get to do what I do because like you, I'm able to support leaders to traverse some very challenging terrain and to find solutions for the long-term future and to get through with their sanity intact.
Yeah, amazing story. It resonated too when I read that in the book, and it made me think of one of the things I did with my father when I was a real little guy, kindergarten,
Mm.
first grade, second grade, but I was
Mm.
always sit next to him and watch the evening news.
Right.
And so I was exposed at a very early age to current events and things in the world and crises in the world and whatever.
Mm.
And it sounds like you did the same thing with that
Mm.
exposure. And I'm wondering, because sometimes I think, could my elementary mind at that point really deal with that? And was that more trauma than I should have been exposed to? Did it affect, who I became as an adult and my leadership style now? So I'd just be curious what you think of those early, recognitions that a lot of kids, I mean, they're not even aware of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, people aren't aware that what their children are being exposed to and what we were exposed to as children do form, they become a form of knowledge and our reality, our internal reality. And when we're able to sit and watch all of these different realities play out, you were able to watch the news. You would have seen, you would have identified patterns. Your pattern recognition would have shown up. You would have noticed various things, and that would be absolutely transformative for you and why you took this route in your life. For me, I noticed the patterns the most when, and I have to say, my experience again at Sony really played out because there was one time I noticed that there was, I can say. So back in the 90s, the government, the British government at that time, had decided to make an announcement based on some kind of investment that they had done in with one of Sony's UK divisions. And I remember thinking to myself, hold on a second, I'm in charge of PR here for the UK. Why am I not aware of this? What is going on? What rules are being broken right now to not include a green light process within Sony to enable that to happen? Why are they doing this without authorization or at least collaboration? And I sat on it and thought I was a bit indignant and a bit outraged, of course, just thinking how even though it's the government, they can obviously do what they want, even back in the 90s. And I sat and I thought, what's going on here? So I watched. The next day, the government announced some bad news, and that's when I realized the spin and I noticed the patterns. So I don't look at news in the same way that the majority of people will watch the news today. I look at the trends that are happening. So, for example, last year when I sensed that, but my book is very bipartisan. It's ensuring that everybody can get on board with, the challenges that we're faced with. But when I realized that the Democrats were being really quite complacent, which was which I talk about in my book as well. There was a complacency there, just like usually with incumbents in an industry, they can become very complacent. They think that they're unknockdownable
Yeah.
because they often feel that they've got their loyal fan base, they've got their loyal customers. Nothing can shake them. They can say what they want, they can do what they want, and they're not reading the room. They're not receiving all of the data in all of the different tangible ways and then thinking, okay, what do we need to do here? So when I saw, for example, that the Democrats weren't budging last year, and then I saw that Trump was on the ballot paper, I said, well, Trump's going to come back in again. And that's when I mounted up a complete and utter focus to get my book finished, to ensure that it would be delivered, because it would mean that the world would be happening so much faster than previously under the Democrats. And I thought, we're not ready for this kind of whiplash. We're not ready for this kind of rule breaking change, the normalcy that we would be used to experiencing under the perception that's what the Democrats provide, democratic leadership would provide, is going to have such a major, I don't even want to call it ripple effect. This is why I called my book AfterShock, because the shocks globally are going to be profound. And we were lucky. We had the first, as we say in England with cricket, we had the first innings with Trump. We knew what to expect. His first 100 days were just going to be full of uh, fascinating, fast-paced, unrelenting decisions that would shock the majority of people. And I thought, well, this is we know we've already seen his playbook. We know what's going to happen next. So that's why I made sure I could create a book that would anticipate and support leaders for this new paradigm.
The title really makes that happen, Aftershock, because in
Mhm.
reading the book, it's like there's great leadership things in there. There's seeing trends, as you said. There's, this is what we have to be prepared for.
Mhm.
Uh, it is also a little scary. I mean, reading that book, when you talk about things and how fast they're going to change and what we need to do differently and whatever, you read that book with a little bit of, oh wow, uh,
Mm.
this isn't the regular game plan here. We need to do something dramatically different. So I think the
Mhm.
the title is well picked, because aftershock, it is an aftershock.
Yeah, and the aftershock started, as you'll know. I mean, we were all there during the pandemic. We had no idea that the world could be put on hold for that period of time, and that supply chains could be, stunned to, continue. That the economic the global economy could be that fragile outside of Wall Street, that just because of a virus. And we were warned about this. The problem is, and just like we've been guided, I don't even want to use the term warned about AI. In my TEDx talk back in 2019, I'm saying we need to become an emotionally intelligent organization to prepare ourselves for AI, the societal changes, and as well as uh, climate. And it's very hard from a human being perspective to get out of our comfort zone. And when there are so many aftershocks happening all at once, I was asked the question by a prominent leader, well, which one do you start at once? And my response to that was all of them. Because they're all happening at the same time. You can't focus on one to then focus on the other. We all need to learn at exactly the same pace and at the same time. And trying to find one particular source that can do all of that can be really overwhelming, which is why I decided to write a book specifically for CEOs, because they need to be our North Star. They need to be our guiding light on creating the type of products and services that we actually need, rather than just being able to make impressive quarterly earnings at this time. So we've got a lot to do, and it's never too late to start. We just have to do what we have to do, and to approach all of the different systems as an adventure in a way. One of the You've read my book, which I appreciate. One of the aspects that because I had to really think about what is it that people have to do to make this change. And first of all, we need to look into ourselves. And please excuse me if I'm sounding like a hippie, I'm not. But we have to look into ourselves and go, you know what? The world does not need what I used to be able to provide. I need to adjust, and I need to accept that my previous behaviors and modalities and approaches and ways of doing business are kind of extinct. Not all, of course. There's a lot of experience that can be brought forward, but the mentality needs to be retired, which I think is one of the reasons why, for this year in particular, there's been such an unprecedented amount of CEOs that have moved on, that have retired. Because to be fit for purpose now, you need to have an AI strategy, you need to have a climate strategy, you need to have a governance strategy, and you need to understand how to evolve people all in lockstep to create the product or the service that you need to create right now. And what I found was that it's really hard for leaders to be able to do that without going through the I'm sorry for what I have done. I'm sorry for what I'm about to do. Because, and it's no wonder, and I'm sure there's going to be backlash on this, but there's no wonder that so many organizations are laying people off due to AI strategy or whatever. Or if you look at Accenture, they're training 700,000 employees apparently to be able to work with AI. And if they are not demonstrating that they're able to adapt to AI, they're going to be laid off. So and that goes beyond the RTO, return to office kind of mandate that people were having. Then it was just like, we just need you in your seat. Now it's a step further. We need you to grasp and understand and adapt with AI models, so we're able to create the kind of product, service, and value for customers, or let's call them stakeholders. I won't call them shareholders, but stakeholders in the entire system. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, and that's why I then go from mea culpaing, which is you apologize and then you apologize again for what you're about to do next. You then move into a tabula rasa, which is you've got a blank sheet of paper, blank sheet, How are you going to start? And if anything, this is probably the most exciting moment, because if you're able to forge something for the first time by using the new rules, the new toolkits, the new systems that are available to us, it's going to be one heck of an adventure. It's like going to Mars. You just don't know what's going to happen, but it's happening on our own planet.
You dedicated a whole chapter to mea culpa, and
Hmm.
you just explained what that is. That is not a usual message that CEOs are going to give to their people. So, how do you do that, and why do you do that,
Mm.
knowing that it might freak out your employees a little bit?
Well, here's the thing. There's it that does freak people out. And I'll give you an example. Have you ever had anybody from that has, when people go to Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, they they might reach out to people and say, "Hey, I just want you to know that I've had quite a challenging time, and I want to apologize for some of the behaviors that I've done." And I've seen how that works. And when I see that happen, or when other people have seen that happen, they're a little bit shocked. They're not used to that kind of transformational uh, uh, behavior. Nobody's used to that. It would be what's happened to this guy, a woman, or what's happened. So instead, the approach really needs to be, first of all, it's to internally metabolize it. It might be with a coach, might be with a therapist, it might be with ChatGPT. I mean, there are just so many phenomenal tools out there to be able to get to that realization. The next part is to be able to have the rest of the organization or the rest of the leadership team be coached all simultaneously as well, for the simple reason that you need everybody to do this together in sync. If you're doing it in an isolated way, it just takes. I'm going to use Alcoholics Anonymous scenario again. You just have that one weak person that is trying to abstain from alcohol only, or let's say a drug habit or some kind of addiction that is truly blowing up their lives. Um, and instead they go in without having done it together as a collective group. They will go in, everybody's treating them as normal and saying, hey Joe, have a drink. And it just weakens the system. So you need the system to be strong, and for a system to be strong, you need everybody to go through the process together, which I think from a CEO's perspective, because the CEO will traditionally not want to be coached, as I'm sure you're aware. The majority of CEOs don't want to be coached. They're usually like to avoid it, because they've made their way to the top through their experience alone and through their grit and what makes them special. They don't want anything to be taken away. So in this instance, I really encourage the CEO to say, okay, I need myself and the rest of the organization, the leadership team, C-suite, to go through a process of coaching to realign us for this next paradigm. So the mea culpaing is really something that happens internally, and then externally, let's say you have all of your C-suite leaders together, you're able to say, okay, so what we're doing, we've decided and realized that our product or service and the way we worked was very much from the old paradigm. We're now needing to work in this new era, and we know that this is going to be really hard for everybody to adjust. It's taken us 6 months to adjust, or whatever, 3 months, 6 months, a year to adjust, to make this adjustment. We know that we're going to have to go through a very similar system with the rest of the organization to make this change. And guess what? There are going to be people there that have just started that are going to be traumatized with this. There are going to be people that have been lifers that are going to be traumatized by it. People that are, they're going to start writing up their resume, or they're going to fall into victim mode, or whatever. A lot of the dynamics that I talk about in the book, the kind of behaviors that can sabotage that kind of change management system. So in this situation, it becomes a through the line integrated vertical and horizontal coaching system. And this is where AI is going to save the day, especially if an organization has budget. If they don't have budget to create their own AI system, whereby it can be an integrated system through all of their performance metrics. And what I mean performance metrics, I don't mean HR performance metrics. I don't mean performance grading that can make or break somebody's, whether or not they get a PIP at the end of a term. This is really about how everybody is able to start a new communication cycle, to break down barriers, to work in more productive ways that enable everybody to move forward. And just to add one more thing to that, if that doesn't happen, if it's done in blocks, it will fail. And which is why one of the reasons why people are saying there's not enough ROI right now on AI is because if you don't have the entire organization working on it simultaneously, it's not going to work.
There's so much there that I want to dig down deeper into, and we're going to do that. But before I lose it, I want to just say, so you are an author,
Yeah.
written 2 books. You're executive coach now, and you've just been invited into Thinkers 50.
Yes.
That's a huge deal. So how you feeling about that?
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that. Well, I have to tell you, I was shocked. I was like, what? What are you talking about? I was shocked, so shocked, because there are people, Seth Godin's in that list. There's all sorts of phenomenal leaders. There's somebody that I admire, Megan Reitz. She's her article is on the front page of MIT's magazine right now. She's in that list. I'm shocked. I'm just shocked. I'm shocked. And it only started sinking in today when Hamilton Mann, who is the author of Artificiality, and he's a professor at INSEAD, he sent me a message and say, Caroline, you are in the top 50 most distinguished leaders in Thinkers 50. And it was when he said that, I was like, really? Are you exaggerating? What are you talking about? So it's a kind of it's a pinch me moment, because I don't put my name forward. People don't put their name forward. Someone somewhere, people make that decision. And I have to say I'm pretty honored, because the book only came out 64 days ago. It was rushed out. My book publisher, I think I gave them the breakdown, because I said to them, you don't realize how urgent this book is. And they're saying, yes, we do, Caroline, but you're breaking us for wanting this to happen. And I said, well, we have no choice. That we are in unprecedented times. We can't work on a 2-year cycle here. We've got to get this book out within months. Ray Dalio gets his book out within a couple of months. So it's like, well, I'm no Ray Dalio, but I can try do the same. And that's how it's been. So I honored doesn't cut it. I mean, I feel like I've just been bestowed something that I would never have imagined that could happen to me. I mean, it's just shocking. I'm shocked. I'm stunned. I'm in disbelief.
Congratulations. Congratulations. That's a huge accolade. So
Thank you.
that's awesome. You know, another thing you say in the book that I think is interesting is you say that you're an artist.
Hmm.
So what is your expressive medium?
Writing, writing. I've done art. I've painted. I've done stuff like that. But I mean, and I have art on my walls that I've made that I'm quite proud of. But there's not, if anybody said, nobody would buy it. It's just something I'm like, oh, I quite like that. I like the composition of that. But in general, I find that I'm an artist in conversations. That sounds a bit lofty, and it sounds a bit ridiculous, but I love listening to lots of different viewpoints. I love listening to people and hearing about how they're navigating the world, how they're navigating a problem, how they see perspectives. And if they're game, they're my medium, because I'll say, "Hey, I just noticed something." Do you literally with this big beaming smile? "Hey, I just noticed something. So can I talk to you about this?" And sometimes one has to work very delicately, because if they don't know me, they can be really shocked, because it can be just too intense. And I'll say to people, like, sometimes I'll say, I'm sounding like a clairvoyant. I'm not. But I said to a friend one time, I said, "Hey, can I tell you something?" She said, "What?" "I think you're pregnant." And she's like, "No, no, no." A week later, "I'm pregnant. How did you know?" And it's like, because of your body language, how you're communicating, everything was emoting to me that there is this. Also, when I'm in a coaching session with a client, we're able to we have very powerful artistic, what I call artistic conversations, where they're my medium and I'm helping them find a path. So so that's why I call myself an artist, because I can't, in my book, I also confess that I am neurodivergent. So I am what they would call AU-ADHD, which means that I have autism and ADHD. So my brain, if you think about neurotypical will go from A to B. An ADHD person might kind of be a bit erratic to get to A to B, so it might take them 5 minutes to get to B, or it'll take them 11 months. You never know. With and then with autism, it's like there's an intensity to get to that B, that they'll know everything about all of that. And then with AU and ADHD. By the way, if any professor with neurodivergent experience, professional qualification listens to me, they'll just eye roll at me. But with regards to the AU ADHD, they will be all over the place, doing a deep dive on everything all at once. So when I see a problem, or I see a human being and their problem and all of the systems around them, I will do, as somebody says to me, the most exhausting emotional work, because I will see all of these systems play out, and I will try and plot numerous paths to see where their future could land. Um, and I absolutely love it. That's kind of where that's at.
Hearing you talk about it, it's like you see it as a superpower as opposed to a hurdle.
Yes, absolutely. And there's the opposite side. I have, and my youngest kid, it has autism, but he has an intellectual disability. He was born with a rare brain condition called choreplexus hyperplasia, which meant that he had to have neurosurgery from the time he was 8 days old. And he has global motor skills delay, and will have that for the rest of his life. And he also has trouble understanding cues, and had to go to a special needs school. And quite frankly, I'm very blessed that he was able to do all of those things. And he started college a couple of weeks ago to do some special needs vocational training, so he can learn how to be a barista, for example. And he's doing life his way to the best of his ability with his special designation. And I am also blessed to be able to do what I do with my special designation. We both have gifts, but in very different ways.
So let's get back to the coaching thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of people, I think a lot of people realize that the one-on-one with a coach, that I do a lot of that, you do a lot of that, and that is effective. But you talk a lot in the book about this collective coaching, so in a group atmosphere and so on. So tell us your theory about why that's important and why that's a big piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So there are two different aspects. Yes, one-to-one is absolutely incredibly powerful. You and I know the transformative power of having a one-to-one coaching relationship with a client. It's able to move them forward in ways that they're able to viscerally or invisibly understand, comprehend, and execute, or not execute, depending. And it may just show up later without them knowing, because it would be in the subconscious. So subconscious, I should say. So one of the challenges is, how do you create that kind of change at scale? So group coaching is going to be very important. Be able to do it across an entire organization is going to be very important. My recommendation in my book is that you need to have a chief coaching officer in practically every single organization, or failing a chief coaching officer, somebody that can actually be designated to create the kind of change in the organization that is required. And to be able to do that, you're going to need to bring in a suite of coaches, like, let's call them an army of coaches, potentially therapists as well, potentially sober coaches as well. And maybe you will want to talk about sober coaching in a minute. Um, uh, the issue is that it can't happen. Coaching can't just be for an elite level of performers. I'll give you an example. One of my clients, I can't mention the company name, they had been desperately desperately keen to be included on the management track with a university in Europe, and was rejected because they didn't feel that they were quite up to it. And that person was quite dejected, as I'm sure you would have experienced as well, in your experience, was dejected, had reduced their level of engagement in what they were doing. They became cynical. They didn't really want to show up for meetings anymore because they didn't get what they wanted, which they knew would actually impact the organization. So just thinking about that for a second. Why does coaching need to be for an elite? Why does, or for problem people that are about to go onto a PIP, for example, a performance plan? Why? It's too late. Both of them are either going to be too elitist, it's either too elitist or it's too late. So in this particular situation, if you get everybody onto the same page, just like if you're launching a product, you're rarely are you just going to go advertising only. You're going to make sure you have a word of mouth campaign, you have a marketing campaign, a TV campaign, if TV's campaigns are still a big thing, cinema campaign, billboard campaign, PR, social media, all of these different things. You can't just do one. You can if you're a very small company, but in general, you need to have the entire campaign to ensure that you're able to reach your audience. And you can get the same kind of impressions. You need 8 impressions with a consumer or customer before they see that a product is credible and that they may be inspired to buy it. That is just marketing data. Same situation with your team. If a CEO comes in and says, okay, we're going to be changing this. However, uh, here's the 90-page guidebook on how to do it, go get. You're not dealing with all of the different factors that the resistance, the denial, the debating, the potential chats that are happening behind the scenes that can make or break whether or not something will actually move forward. There'll be all of these collective sabotaging activities that will be happening. So instead, if a CEO, a really driven, highly motivated CEO is able to say, okay, we have to do things differently because we don't have 2-3 years for people to finally get it. We need people to get it within the next 6 months, and we need to see an ROI, and we need to see the impact, the results, the change systems all happening simultaneously. You need everybody to be coached all at the same time, to all be on the same page, and to be able to work in lockstep with all of the different systems that are going to be implemented. Otherwise, people burn out, they resist, they resign, they will sabotage, they'll bully others, they'll upward bully, downward bully, sideways bully, and they're all very, very toxic behaviors. And coaching, especially if it's done from the top with a very, very strong mission and it's all aligned and the system is being treated as one big coaching system rather than it being treated as an afterthought, you're more likely to get success. And there's data on that with the International Coaching Federation.
In your book, you mention, and exactly what you said just ties right into this, is
Mm.
Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline.
Mm.
One of the best
The
compliments I
best.
received in my life was I had one of my executives call and say, "When did you read The Fifth Discipline?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You haven't read it?" And I go, "No." He goes, "It sounds like you wrote it." So I thought, oh,
Oh my gosh, bravo.
yeah. So that talks about a learning organization, which is what you
Mhm.
described. So you can't just expect that the CEO or the people at the top know all the secret formula. The
No.
people below have to know it as well. And if you're going to learn as an organization to go forward as an organization, everyone needs to have that same ability to learn and grow in that way.
100%. And yes, he is an absolute idol. I had the biggest realization when reading his book about the learning organization. And I just remember being stunned, thinking organizations aren't learning organizations. They don't, majority do not want to learn. The ones that do, learn are profoundly shift the markets that they're in. And people think that they're able to go with, quick hits or to be able to speak in platitudes or quote various things, but without realizing actually you have to do so much work within that system to make it happen. But just to go back to Senge, I was really quite thrilled when I saw him at MIT. I think it was about 6 months ago. He was at MIT um, meeting with the team or the professors that had taught me on business sustainability, which is the environmental climate stuff, and how businesses can adapt through supply chain issues and how to ensure that you're creating something that is truly sustainable and ethical. And he was there, and I'm like, yes, exactly, because that is a major part of the system. A learning organization needs to understand all of these different aspects. It's not as simple as saying, okay, I've got this product, let's just ship it. And it's like, without realizing the plastics cause damage to the environment, the liquids probably cause damage to the environment as well. What happens to this after it has been disposed of, and how is the organization all cognizant of this while the product is being designed? So it's very, very, and everybody needs to have that mindset.
Another theme that jumped out at me too was when you talk about empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy sometimes is looked at as kind of a bad word now.
Yeah.
It's like you're weak or something if you
Mm-hmm.
focus on empathy. Yet we all know that having empathy, connects with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know who you're talking about because when they said the problem with the West is that they're too empathetic. Is that the quote you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we're not going to credit the person for that, but anybody that knows will know. And I remember going, he doesn't understand. And I was actually really happy that he said that, only because from my sense of curiosity. And I was happy because I'm a bit warped here, so I apologize for showing an unusual side. But happy in the sense that when people misuse the term empathy and it weaponizes it, it gives leadership coaches and emotional intelligence coaches the opportunity to rectify it. That's why I'm oddly happy that he had said it. So the reality is that when he says that, he doesn't realize. Oh no, when he said it, what people don't realize is that he's actually not understanding it correctly. He's thinking sympathy. We all have empathy. He has empathy. His uh, goal to always ensure that his products are satisfying. Let's use, okay, without naming him. The fact that he is trying to solve many, many problems and is disrupting many, many industries because he doesn't think that they're advanced enough. That's actually empathy right there. A lot of people might say that is a revenge gene thing or a revenge mode or something like that. But in his term, people who are choosing to kind of take a shortcut and say empathy is the West's greatest failing, or whatever the phrase that he said. I thought to myself, well, the problem with that is that people are going to misunderstand it. And the second aspect is that it isn't necessarily empathy that is lacking. It's the fact that people aren't realizing that they need to actually communicate better to create the problems that need to be solved. So the problem that the mode that this person uses is first principles. And when you've got first principles, it changes everything entirely. He thinks empathy is emotions. And people, if you look at the outrage culture that happens, he may have been confusing it with that. So if I was to reframe and say, okay, maybe he meant outrage culture, that people are spending all of their time in outrage culture, which this person is fueling already, then that's one aspect. But in general, I believe that empathy, we need to be empathetic for our customer. If we're not empathetic for our customer and we don't have systems in place within the organization to understand exactly what the organization is about, and to ensure that it is for the greater good, it is for humanity, it is saving resources in some way, then you're going to have a different outcome. So I'll give you an example, and this is quite self-serving, so I apologize, but you will see right through it. But my book, for example, is not available in paperback. The reason being is that I was not, and this isn't empathy, but I'm trying to help people to become empathetic when I explain this to people, which is that when you buy a book, it takes approximately one mature tree that has to be chopped down to produce 25 books. And when we know that there are print runs, well, I know there are minimum print runs of 3,500 to 5,000 books. That's about, oh my gosh, I think 600, 700, 300, 400 books. We've got wildfires happening at all of these different aspects. Why hasn't the print industry decarbonized and just immediately flicked the switch to say we don't want to be responsible for this? I'm not asking people to not eat beef, for example, which is I think a top 5 carbon crime, for want of a better phrase. You've got gas and oil, and you've got all of the other industries that are there. I think the reality is that we're able to make conscious decisions, and that requires empathy. We need to see that the global south, for example, are really struggling because the global north have been making a lot of decisions for over a century that has created the climate crisis. And we're in this climate crisis, and we're now having to shift our own businesses because of the decisions that we've been making over the past 100 or so years, and our forefathers have been doing. So we have an opportunity to really shift everything and to actually bring in some empathy and say, okay, what do I need to do to right the wrongs of my forefathers and foresisters, foremothers, and so on, and what I have done, and to try and rectify what we're able to do. Because through an empathy lens, I want my children to be able to breathe in 10, 20 years' time. Every summer, as you know, you're in Seattle, in the Seattle area. We have problems with air quality, and we're supposed to be in the Cascadia, where the air quality is supposed to be virtually second to none on the planet. So we have some serious problems, and empathy, I believe, is needed for us to be able to identify what we need to do to move forward.
And to get there, you say in the book too that neuroplasticity is the meaning of life. So
Yeah.
it's almost like we have to reprogram, our nervous system to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do those kind of changes, and to be brave enough to say this is hard, but this is what needs to be done.
You said it better than I could have done. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, when we think about, all the things that sometimes it's very overwhelming. And when I work with a lot of coaches
Mm,
or a lot of leaders as a coach, often that's what it is. They're overwhelmed with all the things that need to be
totally.
done. So, how do we how do we try and focus on what's the most important thing and get it done? Or are you suggesting what I think I heard you say later? You just have to be willing to hit a lot of things at once, and there isn't just one thing you can do.
Mm. No, I mean, you might be able to. I mean, for a lot of organizations, if they've been aware of all of these systems for a long time and they've been working alongside to mitigate all of these risks, they're going to be way ahead of the challenge. They're way ahead of the curve, and that's great. And there are organizations that are doing that. You just have to look at companies like Moderna or Johnson and Johnson, lots of different companies that are already ahead of the curve. And that's great. They will still have a lot to improve. I mean, every single day we're making choices that are impacting the environment, and based on our what I call addiction to and our addiction to comfort in some ways, because it's easier to get a delivery from Uber Eats, or to get Amazon deliver a pack of paper clips, or whatever, or to eat 5 desserts from all sorts of places around the world, and not realizing actually the footprint and the fact that those farmers aren't able to, sustain themselves. What do you do? It's a lot. It's a lot. And I get it. That's a lot. We're not going to be able to solve everything in one day. We're not going to be able to probably solve everything in our lifetime, but we can try. And I think the message, if I can give a message at this point, to make it hopeful and helpful, is to take some time out, especially with the coach, with your coaching team, and bring chairs into the room. Professor Peter Hawkins talks about this, and I write about this in my book, which is that in the boardroom, he will bring in an extra chair, and he does it in a very somber way. He'll say, I'm just going to go out. I've got to go and get something. And he comes along and he says, and I'm just going to bring the environment into the room. This is a seat at the table. I then go one step further and say, we need to bring AI, you need to bring society, and, whatever other chair. And there's nobody in that chair. But to be able to speak of the systems that we're facing, and it may sound strange, and there's going to be people that think, you're a little bit crazy for considering bringing this in, but it is pretty much essential for us all to think about all of these systems. We're never going to get ahead of it. We're never going to be able to feel like we've won the race. But it is going to be an opportunity for us all to be able to say, okay, we have an opportunity to reset and restart. The old model is no longer working, unless you're NVIDIA, in which case, they're just going to keeping on and doing very well. But even they have very good leadership models within the organization. And you have the opportunity to be able to say, okay, let's restart, let's reset. What do we need to do? Let's start with a blank page. Let's do the tabula rasa. Let's do it. What do we need to do? Let's go on an adventure.
This is all so fascinating, and I will tell you that I'm not even halfway through all the questions I had thought about to ask you, but time is always the challenge. But in anticipation of our discussion today, what haven't I asked you that you want to be sure and get in the program?
Ooh, in anticipation, I think the only question left really is, and it's going to be a contemplative question, or a question for your listeners to contemplate. And I ask this, I have a 100 days of movement group. And in my book, I talk about a 100 days reset as well, for a mindset reset for CEOs and their leaders. But in this particular instance, I want to ask your listeners to just stop for a second and think, where would you like your mindset, your colleagues' mindset, and your organization to be in 365 days' time? What would you like to change? Or what can you no longer tolerate? What do you no longer want to see in your organization that is holding you back in this new paradigm? And just sit with that answer. It may take a while to answer.
Caroline, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Oh, a pearl of wisdom. A pearl of wisdom. Oh, a pearl of wisdom. Oh. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to make this very relatable. If you're listening to this podcast, you are a learner, and you are not satisfied with the status quo, and you are hungry to change. So my pearl of wisdom is really a request, which is, go be the change you want to see in the world.
Well said. Well, Caroline, this has been fascinating. As I said, I just couldn't get all in that I wanted to, so maybe we'll have to do part two at some point.
I
Uh,
would love that.
it's very fascinating, and I think you put a new twist and a different look at all the things we're talking about, which I think is healthy and makes us all think deeper and dig deeper. So I appreciate that. So thanks for your time today. This has been very enjoyable.
Thank you so much for your generosity of time. Thank you.
Okay, well, have a good rest of your day, and hopefully we'll maybe meet down the road one of these days.
Yes, that would be amazing. I know, we're just down the road.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.